Hey, you all. So,
Hi, Roger.
hey, doing something different here. Let me
Good, you got a good blue shirt.
let me go on here. Second. I want to get this. I'm gonna find it. Drive. Right. Mitzi, can you see that okay? What's on the screen? Can you see that presentation?
I see the front of your shirt.
No, I gotta share the screen here. We got it. Hold on.
You mean you're transmitting it to their house? That's incredible.
How's that now?
All right, I got it.
Yes, that's better, Roger.
Well, all right then. We're cooking with gas. All right. Okay, so I keep thinking it's a touch screen. It's not. So let me go back to. I think I can go back one. There we go. All right. Oh, PowerPoint. Oh, look at that. Dang it. That's okay. I did it all here. So listen, so tonight, no, it's not necessary. I put it all here. So we're going to look at the fourth commandment now, okay? And so now we're up to remember the Sabbath. All right, and so there's no way we'll get it by, we never do. And so tonight we'll get, if I don't want to start and go, we'll have to go to like 20 after, I know something to do. So we're just gonna do what we do here tonight. So here's how we're going to start this though. Let me pop this to you as we go. What describe your ideal day off? And think about some of the details here. Okay, your ideal day off. What would it look like? Who would you spend it with? What's something you would do or not do on that day? Ideal day off. What would it be? Think about it for a second.
When I was working. Roll our days.
Well, but are all of them ideal? You know, did you hear what Bob said there? Bob said all our days are off. For everybody to say, but I'm saying like, but are they all ideal? What would the ideal day off look like?
All different.
They're all different, aren't they? Everybody's different, yeah, but what's the difference? No, I had to think about this. I still can't come up with my ideal day. Like I still can't come up with what would it do? I don't know what would it not have in it? Mow, wouldn't have to mow.
I think they should start with prayer.
No, I want your idea, not my idea. You tell me what your idea. Okay, do you do that every day?
Yes.
Well, that's not part of an ideal. That's an every day. I want to know your ideal day, just in general, what it would be.
Spend time with family.
Time with family, okay, a time with family, what else?
Visit the friends.
Maybe a visit with friends, yeah. Okay. I don't know what it would be, I don't know. Where, what, like, who would you spend it with? Man, I can't think of anybody, and
Get together with my y'all friends.
y'all friends, okay. That's good. Ideal day. Yeah. I know what it would look like. It would be sunny. I'd have a sunny day, is what it would look like. It would be sunny. It would be temperature wise, it would be in like the 70s, right? Low to mid 70s for me.
Yeah.
That would be an ideal day, something like that. Clear sky. Yeah, I think in the mountains. I don't. Ideal day somewhere in the mountains, maybe on a lake, not the ocean, but on a lake. Somewhere around the lake, water. I think it was like that.
I told them today that I missed sitting on our front porch, looking out on the valley.
There you go. So it has a certain view. Yeah. I'm not gonna hide, I don't wanna walk anywhere. I heard somebody say, "Hike for you, that's a good thing, not me, I don't wanna hide." What would it do? I don't know. Cindy, I take Cindy with me. If she wanted to go, oh, I know what it is. It has to have like a really good. Cool place to eat. You know?
No, you're on a diet, right?
And I get ice cream on my ideal day. Right? But you understand what we're saying, so like, what would they, like, what would I do? I just, I might have some. I don't know. For me.
I was down on one of our garden clubs.
Right?
Ladies today, when we were going this month, and she said, well, where are we gonna eat?
Where are we going to eat? Exactly. I mean, it's gotta have. Food's massive. Food is huge. All right. Cindy, who's your idea? Who was your idea with that? Don't say it, okay? On that, so, but you could conjure something, an ideal day off. What would it look like? Think about it some more. So here we're going to watch now, we're going to watch the video. Okay, of what he did. It'll take about 10 minutes. And so let's watch this and see what he has to say for us today. Is the volume okay for you guys? Can you hear it? Carolyn, y'all hear that?
No, I'm not getting any volume.
You'll have to turn on your volume. I've got it on mine.
Well, I turned it up as high as it would go.
That's the best I can do on it.
Okay,
So we come today to the fourth commandment in which God commands us to
okay,
honor
I
the
hear
Sabbath,
that
to
just
remember the
fine.
Sabbath day,
All
and
right,
to treat
good.
it as holy. And as we're going to learn in the chapter, that has to do with both rest for us, but also renewing and reconnecting in our faith in God. So I'd ask you, what do you do when you renew? Where do you go? What are the places that you like to be to just calm your heart or soothe your soul or allow you to recreate, to recreate? And for me, it's always water. And I think about the Lake of the Ozarks. It's about 2.5 hours from my house in central Missouri. And when I go there, I love to get on a boat. I love to be on a paddle boat with my granddaughter. I love to just sit on the dock. And it is renewing for me. Well, for the ancient Egyptians, and maybe for the Israelites as well, part of that came through being on the Nile River. The Nile River was a central part of life in ancient Egypt. It was the source of life. It sustained life there. And I thought you might enjoy, again, because I want to take you to these places that tie into this story. I thought you might enjoy going to the Nile and just experience what you would experience if you were taking a journey down the Nile River. So let's head to Egypt. Let's take a journey down the Nile.
Volume okay?
Hope you enjoyed that quick trip down the Nile River, and I hope you have a chance to experience it one day on your own. It was a remarkable experience to take a boat down the Nile River, to experience and to see what Moses had to have seen many times as he was traveling between cities when he lived in Lasset, Thebes or Luxor. So we want to focus on the commandment to honor the Sabbath, remember the Sabbath, and to keep it holy. And in this, I find that Christians do a really lousy job of remembering the Sabbath day, of honoring it in the way that God intended. And the people that I think do it the best are my Jewish friends. And so once more, we return to our conversation with Rabbi Art Nemitov. Let's take a listen to what he has to say about the Sabbath.
The Sabbath is central to who we are as Jews. We operate our entire calendar around Shabbat. We work for the week, waiting for Shabbat to come, and then we sadly say goodbye to it. It is a time of renewal, a time of rest, but more importantly, it's a time of imitation of God. It says in the book of Genesis that after 6 days, God then rested on the seventh. When I rest on Shabbat, I'm regenerating myself. I'm regenerating that soul that God has given me so that I can go out and do good in the world just as God does good in the world.
So what does Shabbat look like in terms of practice for you and your family and for the members of your community?
For me personally, Shabbat includes services with our community on Friday night. Shabbat begins on Friday evening at sundown. It continues till Saturday evening at sundown. Because it says in the book of Genesis, there was evening as morning the first day. So to our days begin in the evening and continue through the day. It begins with services in the evening, and then it continues with a Sabbath meal with my family. And then Shabbat afternoon is a time to rest and relax. In a traditional world, it would be visiting with friends and family, no electronics, no driving, would all be very natural and doing no work of any kind. I interpret a little bit more liberally. So for me, Shabbat will include a bike ride. Shabbat will include gardening with my wife at our house. Shabbat will include perhaps going to a movie together, because I never have a chance to go to a movie. It's a time for me to do that which is relaxing and nourishing. It's definitely a time for family and friends. If we could, some of us would be on our phones and we'd be working 24/7. There is no longer that sense of walking out the door and turning the key and you have a different life. It's all been blended together. Shabbat is an opportunity to say, stop. Don't do that. You need to have this time for yourself, to regenerate your soul, to regenerate your family. And that's what the gift of Shabbat is for us. You know, what I love about Shabbat is we don't ask God to do anything on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. With one exception, we ask for peace. We praise God for what we have in the world.
So we allow God to rest on the seventh day, just as we do. That's wonderful. For many of our people visited the Holy Land, and you get to the Holy Land and you find elevators, the buttons are all pushed, you're going to stop on every floor. For Christians, sometimes it seems like taking the commandment to a degree that feels almost absurd. And so explain that, help us understand why that's not the case, and what's beautiful or good about that.
If God says to you, jump, what do you ask?
How high?
But you don't just ask how high. You ask when, how often, where, what direction. There are 100 questions you ask, because if in fact God is your God and you have this intimate relationship and you want to please God, you want to do things exactly the way that God wants you to do it. And so if God says to me, do not work on Sabbath, I want to know exactly what it is that God is expecting of me.
What constitutes work?
Exactly. And so if work constitutes creating something or changing status, every time I push a button on an elevator, I'm creating a circuit. I'm creating something. And while it may not feel like work to us, it is the intent behind the prohibition. And so in order to be as true to God as one possibly can be, one goes to as many extremes as one can. I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's the notion in Judaism of building a fence around the Torah, that you don't want to violate the laws. You want to honor God in the best way possible. And therefore you build this fence so that you don't even accidentally violate those principles, that you continue to stay true to God. In liberal Judaism, it's a little bit different. I don't particularly feel I am doing work when I'm pushing a button, but from a traditional perspective, it's very powerful. And it creates, by the way, a humility and a carefulness in life that I think is very valuable for all of us.
So one last question on this. I think many people would be curious about, how does the Friday evening service differ from the Saturday morning service? And do people attend both, or are there different people who attend each of those?
I'd like them to attend both. Friday night services are called in our tradition Kabbalat Shabbat, literally receiving Shabbat. And it is a joyful, often song-filled service that has a series of psalms that celebrate God and celebrate God's goodness. And it is bringing joy and welcoming to the Sabbath bride. We view Shabbat as a bride and we are the groom. It comes from a poem in the 15th century And that poem is called L'Chadodi, and it imagines Shabbat, the Sabbath, to be a bride. We welcome that bride into our lives. And think about whenever you see a bride come into a room, it's a moment of joy, a moment of beauty, and that's what we're welcoming into our lives. And it's a very brief service, it has a traditional structure, but it begins with this welcoming of Sabbath. Saturday morning, which is a more relaxed time because we're not at work, it's a longer service. Again, we don't ask God for changes. We ask God, we praise God for what God gives us, but we also study Torah. And so unlike Friday night, we take out the Torah scroll, which contains those 5 books of Moses, and we read from it. And we also read what's called the Haftarah, which is one of the prophets, a lesson of prophets that has the same theme as the section of Torah that we read that particular Saturday. And then often there is a sermon, a drasha, explanation, inspirational message that is offered on the Sabbath, on that Torah portion for the week. And that takes place on Shabbat morning.
Okay. So we return once more to the commandment. Remember the Sabbath day and treat it as holy. To remember it means to observe it. It means to take rest. It means to do the things that renew us and recreate us. This is a gift from God. But I don't want you to forget the last part. Treat it as holy. To treat something as holy is to treat it as belonging to God. And so this day is a gift from God. It belongs to God. And in the midst of treating this holy, we spend time with God. We pray, we worship, we read scripture. I want you to make that a holy rhythm in your life because it's in that time of worship, prayer, scripture study, listening for God's voice, being filled with God's spirit, that we find our soul renewed. May you be blessed by observing the Sabbath, by remembering the Sabbath day and treating it as holy.
So. Hey, so what did you feel like when you saw that at the beginning there? How did you feel as you were seeing the images of the Nile River?
I was thinking about Moses as a baby being flooded.
Oh, right. Right. Yeah. He talked about, these are images like, talking about like the banks, and everything that Moses would have looked at, whatever, so long ago, that kind of thing, but yeah. What are some physical places that renew you? Here, like the church, okay. All right, what else?
I like to go out in my flower garden early in the morning.
Early in the morning, right now.
I
Okay.
come to the garden alone.
Oh, okay. All right. Where else? Anything?
Yeah, something that we've got a porch with 2 chairs on it. There's only 2 of us in the whole development
Right.
that has a porch. And we were sitting out in the sun this afternoon and it was so peaceful and nice. We haven't done that before.
Right.
And look at that, he's asleep.
Yeah.
Wake up, son. I'm awake.
We talked about unfortunately, like my 2 porches in my life, one, my grandparents' porch. But sometimes when you came here, you didn't know who might be sitting up there on the porch when you came for a visit. Could be Uncle Woodrow, could be the Trails, the Collinses. There were Collinses over there. They got some of them in the family too. Or maybe it was Skinny Brown or Sammy Brown, her nephews by one of her sisters, or you just didn't know who was sitting out on the porch. But and then it's the porch there at the farm, looking out at City's Hall, her mom and dad's porch like that, looking out there. Yeah, watching the coyotes.
We were sitting on the porch with David and Doris just a
Oh,
few minutes ago,
right.
looking out over the hills and the mountains, and I was just daydreaming.
Just that right there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I was in the swing with Doris and she commented, what a
Right.
wonderful day it was, you know, look, you can see the blue sky.
Oh, it's the best. It's really good. Well, good. I'm glad you have some places that you can go and feel. Now, I tell you, our porch up there, I like it. Okay. I sure do. I plan on using the deck around the pool more too, because I get that view that goes back up past, you know, Domino Pizza guys, past that way and out there looking at the mountains towards up north. I like that view up on north part, so it's nice. All right, so when you were listening to the rabbi talk about how central the things that he described, that Sabbath Shabbat is to the life of the Jewish people. What some of the things that he said, did anything appeal to you? That he said, anything go, oh yeah, that's neat or anything,
Well, they look forward to it.
right?
And then they were sad when it was
That's
over.
what he said, so we look forward to it, and then we're sad when he goes away. But yeah, he's speaking for maybe a lot of people, but he's probably not speaking for everybody.
Well, it looked also
All right,
like,
great soon.
he's got a lot of family around, which most of us here in the States don't have that.
Okay, now he's in the States.
Oh, he's in the States.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The one guy is, but he was, who was he?
But Rabbi Simcha, they're somewhere in the States. I mean, he's not in Israel.
Okay, I
No.
thought they were.
Nematol, no.
Well, it looked like they had a lot of people at the table, so. they
Now, I think
must-
that was his family table, his family,
Yeah,
Yes.
well, it's wonderful that he's got that many that they can get together. like
Right.
that.
okay?
Well, I think the joyful part that they, like he was talking about on like Friday night. That's, to me, that would be the anticipation of wonderful singing and,
Mhm.
happy camaraderie between
Right,
members of the church or
Uh-huh.
family or whatever.
right, okay. What else? What did you think? I like the way that they talked about when we welcome Sabbath, like bride and groom. You know, I just thought that was a beautiful image, because I started to think about the first time when the doors opened and there stood Cindy and her dad, and I couldn't see her dad anymore, I could only see her, and it was just, and it took my breath away. It did, it was like my breath was gone. It was, I wonder, like, what if I felt like that about Sabbath, you know, that's a strong feeling.
Yeah.
That's really a welcoming thing.
I think the rabbi has a soothing voice.
He does, doesn't he? He is a peaceful dude. I'm gonna have to find some YouTube stuff from him and listen to him.
It's easy to listen.
Yeah, he is. He is.
And he
But-
said it was a time to celebrate God's goodness.
God's goodness. Okay, so what was another thing that you heard? And I was listening to what he said about, we don't ask for stuff on the Sabbath,
Just peace.
just peace. God gets a rest. Thought about that, yeah. And then
Well,
but
Roger,
there's two parts, right? There's the Friday, and then there's the Saturday, and the Saturday is Torah, prophet that connects. So a little bit of sermonizing or talking about the expounding on the Torah and that. Yeah. Nice.
Roger,
It still comes into its rest, its peace. Yes.
it also had a focal point in it of a time to relax and rejuvenate from the week before.
Right.
And
That's awesome.
I mean, that's what he said. And, he was talking about how that he took a bike ride and that helped him to relax. I mean, I guess Sunday should be a time, as he said, of trying to rejuvenate ourselves.
Right. And that probably gets us into some of the discussion when they talked about work too and all that. But but because he said he was at a more liberal view, a bike ride for him was just that's something he liked to do. And he looked like that was a nice road that he was on there too. It looked like a good place to ride.
That's right.
Didn't look like he would get run over by somebody.
No,
Yeah. I mean, he's probably wearing those little shorts and stuff that they wear all around here. And I'm sure he had a helmet, but man, some of these bikers, they think they own it. Right. Not on Sunday, though. We should give them the road on Sunday. Thank you, Carolyn. All right. And he said like, but then I started thinking, so I want to say this for a second. But it's not the same. Okay.
I mean,
So-
if you regenerate yourself,
Right?
that is to find a personal inner peace,
Uh-huh.
not necessarily physical. You know, just.
Right. I think that's what Carolyn's saying, that she's pointing out that, that's what he was saying. It's time to get renewed and renewed. So Exodus 28, let's read 28 through 11. Exodus 28 through 11 here. Whoever finds the first part. I like to hear like a different translation. You have who has the living translation? Look. Don't y'all have different? Like the Living Bible or something? Why don't you use the Living Bible too? And Gail, did you use Living Bible when you have your hands? Don't have it, okay. Well, read the Living Bible first, will you?
Okay, which word are you?
Exodus 20, we're gonna read 8 to 11.
Okay, 8 to 11.
8 to 11.
Okay. Remember to observe the Sabbath as a holy day. 6 days a week are for your daily duties and your regular work. But the seventh day is a day of Sabbath rest before the Lord your God. On that day, you are to do no work of any kind, nor shall your son, daughter, or slaves, whether men or women, or your cattle, or your house guests. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven, earth, and sea, and everything in them, and rested the seventh day. So he blessed the Sabbath day and set it aside for rest.
All right. What is, anybody have something different? It looks in different words. I have a few different words, same sense, but some different words. Remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. The seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You don't do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or it means you can't milk cows, right? Cows should not be producing milk on that day. That's pretty wild. That would be work. Or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days, as said, the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But rest of the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. And that's really the most different word I think we should think about, and consecrated it. What do you, anything different about it?
The other thing is how.
Holy, okay. Made it holy. What'd you
well,
say?
Roger,
Is,
Roger.
Hallowed, okay, yes, ma'am?
Yeah, well, you have to consider, you have these essential workers like nurses and doctors and things. They don't have any choice but to work on Sunday.
Yeah, and that's where we're going with it. Like, so what constitutes work and what then, because I think, and I would like for you to hold that thought, and it mentioned specifically the people that you just mentioned when we get to the part about maybe how Jesus looked at the Sabbath. When we get to that part, because I think that fits nicely with, and I had never thought of that. You just said that, but I think that fits very nicely with what the view that Jesus would have of the Sabbath. So, yeah, that's good. So we have that. All right. So here's Adam Hamilton. We live in a time when having at least 1 day off per week is assumed, and for many people, 2 days off is the norm. But when we look at the ancient world, there is no evidence that any nation or peoples observed a required day of rest until the advent of the Ten Commandments. Work was limited by the number of hours of daylight and was expected to take place every day. Sunrise and sunset, that's just what you did on that part. The story of God's liberation of the Israelites from Egypt begins for God's concern with them and the harsh working conditions they labored in. The insistence that the Israelites keep the Sabbath and that they grant a Sabbath to their laborers and even their animals was again a reflection of God's concern about quality of life, particularly for those who otherwise would not have had a day of rest. Kind of like Heritage Hall. They have no concern, right? All right. So I want that out of the way. Let's roll that down a little bit, can I? Okay, so consider the working conditions of the Israelites. How do you imagine, coming from what they came from, that they reacted to that command? What do you think? They celebrate that? Yes, maybe some relief, some celebration. Think about who was the God who was the big God in Egypt? Pharaoh. What kind of a false employer was he?
Taskmaster.
Yes, every day, all day, until you couldn't work, couldn't do anymore. And so, how do you think they would compare this image? What kind of an image of God does this show? Right? A God who does talk about that, just in brief, a God who shows care for the quality of life, perhaps not just about things like production, but the quality of life and all that. And so then we would move down into this. How important has the Sabbath been in your life? And I would add to these are some of the, for me, I would say, well, not only how important has the Sabbath been in your life, but what parts of the Sabbath, are there parts of the Sabbath that are more important than others? That kind of thing for me. So how important has it been in your life?
It was huge. It was a big, it was a day off, there was no farming going on, in this church, came home, made food. Family got together and usually sometimes to eat together, or they're just hanging out and playing and
Right.
hanging out.
Some friends came over.
Right.
Yeah. Right on.
Well, Gene and us, our generation, remember the blue laws? No working. on
Well, I had blue laws. We don't blue laws, yeah.
But that, I don't want to say that changed everything, but I think it did change the structure of the family unit.
Right. Well, how did you get around that? How important was Sabbath in your life then that you thought, okay, these changes may not be good. How can I keep these important things about Sabbath in my life?
Well, when I was growing up, we all had big gardens and stuff, but stuff that we did need from the store, like sugar, salt, flour, that kind of thing. We always made sure we got it on Friday or Saturday.
So you prepared.
So we prepared.
You prepared for the Sabbath. So preparation, that's right.
Well, yeah, they used to cook on Saturday, no cooking on Sunday,
The only time you cook on Sunday, that's fried chicken.
What about Easter?
Well,
Yeah.
Well, Roger, I was gonna say, I remember a time when, the stores were closed on Sunday. You didn't.
Well, that's what Vicky was saying, talking about the blue laws.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yep. Knowing that. I wanted to buy my baseball glove and I couldn't because Arlen's was closed. Couldn't get it. Or Hex or whatever we had up there at that time.
When I was a child, there were no stores open.
Right.
Yeah.
And in some towns,
I mean, we did, Wood County, when we lived in Parkersburg, Wood County had blue law. I mean, there was nothing open in Wood County.
some towns actually chained the streets closed
What?
on Sundays, so you couldn't drive your car.
Was that because you had like a Jewish population or anything?
No, it was not Jewish, it was Christian. And in fact, it was primarily Methodist in that town.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
Dang. Did you hear that about those Methodists? Did you hear what he said? They would chain the streets closed that's wild.
Yeah, that's wild.
Couldn't imagine that. Couldn't get out of my driveway and go up down the road, man. That'd be hurting. You know, that's well, let's go then. So is there something that you normally do on? I say we could say like, all right, we go to church. Or that you regularly practice, or does it often get overrun by other things?
Like ball games.
Ball games, yeah. But like, what is there something that you do that?
That's not basketball.
Right. Oh, yeah. Hey, look, there was no basketball on Sundays. It's only basketball on Sundays when I was growing up. Was on Channel 6, and it was an ACC doubleheader. And I was in my grandmother's basement, and she was bringing me food. Boy, I tell you what, that was a renewing place. That basement, that little coal bank fire, and that little black and white 16-inch whatever TV right there. Me sitting in Papa's old recliner, and that was a good day.
Well, that was a form of rest.
That was a great rest, and we'd already been to church and stuff like that. And you just got home, and I went down there so I could catch a game. And
But
be
they
pampered all day.
But
But
they
anyway.
would work. In order to give you.
Well, we're gonna talk about that. I've made a note here about that, because the guy rabbi said he goes to the movie sometimes on the Sabbath. So, is there anything that you regularly do on a Sabbath that you practice? Anything that you do that normally gets overrun by it or can? I thought about that too, like, yeah, soccer games, that was for us growing up. That's the thing that overrun the Sabbath.
My
We were
mom
talking-
told us we couldn't go to ball games on Sunday.
Well, okay, and, you know,
Yay.
and I know, like in our community, right? Little League didn't happen on Wednesdays, there was only one day that you played on Sunday, that was Mother's Day, and it was opening day for Little League. And so that was the only time that we did it. Every other time, no, it didn't happen. Didn't happen at all.
I was thinking about the time, we'd go to Michael's, games.
Right.
And you didn't have time to go to church,
Right,
or you was away at the game, in a motel, and
yeah,
of course, you could still, have some worship in your room on
Okay.
your own.
I'm glad you're saying these things, and I'm glad you're thinking about it, because go back to what we started with in terms of renewing places that you find renewal. And because Carolyn had mentioned how that there was an important thing for the rabbi that he said there, that things to renew and disconnect from, I think of like the regular grind. How do you disconnect from the grind and do that? That's important to God. But God gave us the Sabbath to do that. But when we'll talk about another piece in just a second too. But so let's, as you go through these lists and things that you make in your head about, maybe stuff that you've allowed or that I know I have allowed in my life to like overrun Sabbath practices. Are they somewhat still in line with what the point of it's about rest? It's about rejuvenating. It's about reconnecting and that kind of thing. So think about that as we go on through this. Whoops, wrong one. So, let's see if I can get that out of the way. Can I move this out of the way? I want to hide that. All right, I did the wrong one. All right, so the Sabbath, I can't read through the screen. The Sabbath is the who cares for his people. Oh, the Sabbath is the gift of a God who cares for his people, who wishes for them to have for them a good and beautiful life. So going with what we just talked about, how does knowing God's intention for the Sabbath change your perspective on it? The Sabbath is the gift. This is Hamilton's word. The Sabbath is the gift of a giving God who cares for his people, who wishes for them a good and beautiful life.
Have you forgotten what it says here? Keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your manservant or your maidservant or your cattle or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
All right, so it's going to a soccer game to enjoy your favorite senior kids, or going to their baseball game or something like that. Is that work?
It is for the people you're watching. Why should they have
The
to
kids
work?
are having fun.
The ones that are,
Families are going there. We're going to eat after that stuff. We're having a good time.
yeah, but you are, but not the ones that are in the game. They're doing it for your enjoyment.
No, they're playing a game. They're playing a game. Now, Michael got paid,
They're
but he's
playing-
still playing, I gotta say, he's still playing a game. As a grown up. And it was work. And the game is a job, but I'm telling you. So what I'm asking you is, we're going back to that question, and let's read the next part. Sabbath is not just about resting. It is about remembering, reflecting, celebrating God's work, and creating the world with all of its blessings, and pondering God's deliverance and our identity as his people. Now that's a separate. Thinking of it that way is a separate. But going back to what he talked about, like when you had, we haven't gotten to the Jesus part yet, but we will, Carolyn, because I want you to hold that thought about the medical workers. But like, I mean, those kids, we're going to watch kids play, that's not there. Maybe the restaurant people that you go out and eat with. So, you know, they're working on a Sabbath. But what I wrote was, it said Sabbath doesn't mean things that we don't know. But what does Sabbath mean to them? They got to work. And if I'm not there, they don't get paid. That's my good rationalization right there. That's how I rationalize it.
Don't you think it would mean anything that you do that would bring joy
I think this is the separator.
into your life or somebody else's life?
It's not just about renewal. It's not just about reconnecting. It's not just about rest. It's about remembering, reflecting, celebrating God's worth, and creating the world with all of its blessings, and pondering God's deliverance and our identity as his people. The word that I had in here, the different letters that said, you had how I had a consecrated it, set it apart. That the Sabbath is not like other days. It is a day for holy and remembering the Holy One who made all this stuff and did all these things. It is not just our gift of rest. It is also about remember the Sabbath and keep it holy on those things. And so then, and like the Jews have they have this exhaustive, it's a list of what is work. What was it, like 39 categories or something? 39 categories and what falls into these categories of work. Because he was talking about the hedge around the law, right? And how they build that. And so you got to define it. Remember, when electricity was invented, they had to meet and decide whether it was okay on the Sabbath to flip on a light switch, because you were creating a spark, and it was about building a fire, in a sense. And so they had it, and guess what? Many rabbis, many of them, they said, no, you can't flip on a light switch. Because you're doing that's work. Pushing the buttons on the elevator, you heard this conversation about that, right? Yeah. We think that's overkill, not to a Jew. It's one, they don't want to do anything. He said, how high? Oh, there's all kinds of things. It's not just how high, it's when, it's how far, which side, which way you can go. There's all these things, because you want to please God, you want to do it right. So what is doing the Sabbath right? That comes down to be the question, and I can't answer that for you.
But I think they're missing the point of the Sabbath.
Who is?
The Jews.
Like flipping and switches and stuff?
With these restrictions
Right?
and so on, you can only walk so far on the Sabbath. You cannot flick a light. That's not what it was about. This was God's gift to man. To enrich him. Not to regulate everything he did. And of course, New Testament, Christ, the
Right.
Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
And we're going to read that.
Yeah,
We're gonna look at that.
Sorry.
No, you're good, because we're already flowing, and this is what this is supposed to be. So I won't read this to you, but in what ways do you take time to remember what God has done for you? Remember the Sabbath, to reflect. Remember when you were in Egypt. Remember about those things. What are some practical ways to set apart a day for God? What are some practical ways? I would love to know.
Worship.
Worship, okay, one day, a day of worship, yes, or at least a morning of worship, right? And study.
Yeah.
Because we kind of try to do all at once. I love that they do this to introduce it, and then they have another time to do the law and all that. I mean, I love that. But I would never think I would say like you go to back to where you go morning and Sunday night.
So what do they think about our Sabbath being Sunday?
It's not the Sabbath. That's what they would say. It's not the Sabbath.
I know.
Right, they would say it's not the Sabbath, it's the first day of the week.
Yeah.
Well, and why do we do it on the first day of the week?
Jesus, very.
That's right. And that's what,
Why, I never thought about it.
well, and they also do, it's a different calendar. Sunset, they're still holding the old way, even though we know it's 2 different days.
This was based on the moon.
Yes, and so we know that, and so, but there's so like set aside for worship, make it a family day. Maybe that's a way to think about it. What else? I mean, I think about, let's talk about farmers, man. Guys, some people will not put up hay on a Sunday. They just won't. Unless it's supposed to rain on Monday, and then they say, I gotta get it up. Right? It's been down. They know it's Monday, they gotta get it up. And they don't do it easily. You know what I mean? They would rather do it on Monday than Sunday, but that's what you gotta do. Because you gotta put it in there. But it makes bad stuff for everybody. What else? I'm curious. Are practical ways to set apart day. So identify things for family, identify times of worship and study. What about no work? Nothing connected with your job during the week.
Well, anything that's not, seems like a grind,
That's the word I wrote down on the notes. Right here. Yeah. That's not a grind.
If you're hassled at work 6 days a week, you need that one day to decompress and center yourself
For work, so you can be more productive during the week.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what this is then? And I hear you, because a lot of us, myself included, will think about that. To get through the week, I need to have a day to get greased, but why am I serving my work? Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying? Like, I'm recharging to get better at work? Is that what this is about, the Sabbath? You just see where I'm going with that? It's like, no, that's not what the Sabbath is for. It's not so you can be a great worker. Right? It's
Well, I think-
that's not the purpose of Sabbath.
Yeah, but I also think it depends on the kind, well, like Carolyn said, it depends on who we work.
Well, but she was talking about that in a different way, though. She's talking about the emergency room people, the people at the hospital still, changing the IV, doing everything to get, because you got sick people in there, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I think that's a good question. And it comes back to, what do we think about? And I think I have used Sabbath to say, well, I got to get ready for the work week. I've said that all my life. I've heard that all my life. No, man, that's not what it's for. It's about connecting with God. It's about remembering. I've never thought of it that way until this. I just never have. It's about remember. Can you remember? Can you take the day and dwell upon the things that God has done for you in your life? I'm not talking about how many kids God gave you or how much we've got or anything like that. I mean, the reflection like we do with a meal when we come to the table. That God has granted us the opportunities to love and serve and worship and have people in our lives that are encouraging and strengthening and sustaining. I got, one of my students died on Saturday. I didn't find out about it until Monday coming back from West Virginia. 15 years old.
He killed himself?
No, that was the rumor. That's what everybody started talking about. And she evidently, I heard this today that came through Margaret Beeks, saying that she started to have pain in her left arm all day, with stuff like this. It got worse, and she got sick, and then she felt bad, and she collapsed, and then she died later. 15 years old, family stuck up there. I talked to the mom yesterday, and stuff like that. So I'm like, she's up there with her family, but she had to send her other two daughters, and their stepdad had to come back, the girl's stepdad had to come back, and all this stuff. They don't have any money. They don't have enough. There's a GoFundMe page. We've given to that. We've done stuff. They hit so much, but she can't bring her daughter back here to be buried here. Doesn't have enough money to do that. So her daughter will be buried, they're going to come down here and live. But the thing is like, I think all I can think of is I'm going to go to the funeral Monday. I'm driving to Baltimore. I'm going to that funeral. And because I just think somebody has to be somebody from this community to show that there's people, even though we know these kids today, I had nothing but this was my day. I had my memorial board, I put paper on the wall, they wrote notes to her, they decorated it, they drew pictures, and they did all those things. And
What did she die from?
she just, who knows, she died. And so and we did that today. And those kids would love to go. They're saying, well, are we not going to get to have a funeral here? We'll try doing memorial service when she comes back. But I'm going up there because I'm taking that little rolled up thing. And I'm going to say, look, these people are still with me too. Because that is something that God has done for me. That is something and I don't think I would have friends if I didn't have this. I was sure I would and stuff, but it's not the same connection. It's not the right kind of friends, I don't think. Stuff like I don't know how to say that better. But that idea of making practical ways to set apart a day for God, to remember, to hallow, to consecrate it, to make it holy. Church is a duty for some people. It's not renewal. It's not rejuvenating. It's just something you have to do, or they think you're going to get kicked into hell. I mean, that's the people I grew up with. That's what they would say. I gotta go. I have to go. No, you don't. And so anyway, that's just thoughts.
Didn't he say on there that if you have the Sabbath, then you are renewed, and on Monday you're able to go out in the world and do good for God?
Do good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that just relates to what you just said about you wanted to go.
Yeah, but I don't want to. I want to be a good worker. I do. I think that's important, right? We don't want to be slackers and workers, but that's not. I want to do good. That's a bit. I like the way that's said. All right, so here we go. Exodus 31:13. Be sure, this is later on, right? We were in 20. Tell the Israelites, be sure to keep my Sabbath, because the Sabbath is a sign between you and me and every generation, so that you know I am the Lord who makes you holy. Sabbath carries the traditions, it carries the teachings, it carries the connection. Not just history is important in our life of faith. Okay, it's not, but we don't lose ourselves. We're not anchored by history, but history is what's in there that helps us to learn and move forward into God's future in that sense. And so to have that Exodus there, to remember, not Exodus, but the Sabbath, that's another reason why we got to remember it, so that they don't forget what he's done. Come on, buddy. All right. So I'm curious about what you think, what I'm going to read here. This is out of his book. I also wonder if the death penalty was a metaphor, a way of pointing to the impact of not resting. Because there is in that one of the penalties for this, and this is where I got this last week, and I went back and I struggled to put together, but that death penalty was what you would get for not keeping, the Sabbath. I also wonder if the death penalty was a metaphor, a way of pointing to the impact of not resting. If you're unwilling to stop and rest, Your health will deteriorate, your relationships will suffer, and in 1,000 other ways, you will pay the price. And so what he says right there, I want to know, how does that perspective, what do you think of what he said right there? Do you think there's truth in it, or, because he's talking about like not keeping the Sabbath, there's a death penalty of not keeping the Sabbath. And he's saying, well, I wonder if there's a way for us to take this as a metaphor. That God's thinking, because it really isn't good for you. You're going to die anyway if you don't remember. You just work all the time. What is it? 365, 24/7, 365 kind of thing. What do you think of that statement?
Your body needs rest.
Your body needs rest, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, if you're working all the time and, well, say that's your prison.
Right.
Working all the time is your prison.
More like the Israelites, right?
Yeah, there is no rest.
Mhm.
So that you have to find that rest
Okay.
somehow, some way, and if you don't,
There's a price to pay.
Yeah.
You're going to pay the price. I got you.
actually you just.
Well, I don't think it's an untrue thing to say that. I mean, I think all of us would agree, if you don't stop and rest, your health deteriorates, you do all these things, but I just don't think I just don't, for me, and I know what he's trying to say here, he's trying to get, other ways to say it and get it. But for me, this wasn't as strong as just like things like, and it may be, because I'm older, like set apart. Remember and keep it holy. I'm just in a different place in my life now, where that. But I don't think it was a metaphor. I think he meant it. I don't think it was practice, right? But they did want to. There was a remember. Well, that was in the synagogue. They didn't. I was trying to think when he healed the man with withered hand. Did they want to stone him on that day? Were they want to kill him? Or was it because of his teaching that they wanted to kill him? Or what it was? I needed to go back on that and didn't do it. But I'm just curious about what you all thought of that statement there.
Wife is working and husband's working. It puts the wife in a spot because a lot of times she's got to do cleaning and wash and
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of stuff. So she can go back to work on Monday.
The superwoman. We had I listened to that conversation today, back in one of the administrators' office talking about, and your man Rick Maddox was back here doing this about something with talking about his daughter. And she's just a woman. She's just talking about like her brother, sent her brother to do that work, kind of work and stuff in the house. And she just doesn't get it. Man, just don't. I'm like, oh my God, dude. No, man, I'm the mad dog, whatever. I said, okay. Why don't you say that in front of Barbara? There you go, with the big wall. So there we go. So the Sabbath is a gift. It is a rule to live by. But the challenge of rules, even good ones, is that we can get so focused on the rule that we end up missing its intent. The debate about what does and does not constitute work on the Sabbath was one of the areas in which Jesus challenged people to look beyond the rule to better understand the heart of God. Jesus left that place, and when this is Matthew 12:9-14. Jesus left that place and went into their synagogue. A man with a withered hand was there, wanting to bring charges against Jesus. They asked, does the law allow a person to heal on the Sabbath? Jesus replied, who among you has a sheep that falls into a pit on the Sabbath and won't take hold of it and pull it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? So the law allows a person to do what is good on the Sabbath. Then Jesus said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he did it and was made healthy, just like the other one. The Pharisees went out and met in order to find a way to destroy Jesus. Right? And they felt that they were what? Justified, that they had the law behind them. But this is not this is a sanctioned killing if they wanted to do it. Because they could find their justification in the law on that. And so what makes work, like you were talking about, though, these people, and so Carolyn, I don't think the Sabbath, working on the Sabbath matters unless you are a Christian or a Jew. Because it doesn't matter to you when every day is a lot in that sense. Every day is the same.
Yeah.
If you're not a Christian or a Jew. Because Sabbath, our Sunday, their Sabbath, there is no days that are consecrated or set apart or holy. So if I'm a doctor or a nurse or something and working in a hospital, okay. But then again, I'm doing healing. And if I am a Christian or a Jew and I'm worried about it, I think I can take comfort in what Jesus does here, that I'm doing good on the Sabbath. I'm taking care of people. I mean, we're not going to let people die just because they shut down a hospital and say, hey, everybody come back on Monday, put the IVs back.
Look at the firefighters.
Firefighters and workers, yeah. It just gets beyond ridiculous if we start trying to hedge out all this stuff, right? And so, yeah, it's massive. So the people that do good on you can do good on the Sabbath, Jesus says. And then he said, the Sabbath was created in Mark. The Sabbath was created for humans. Humans were not created for the Sabbath. Right? That it's, I think it comes down to you do what you need to do. You do what you need to do. And some days you got to work. Back in, you just did. I was thinking about now, and especially in the new stuff where, how many people now are working from home? They're not going to a department store. They're not going to Virginia Tech. They're not during the week. They're not going someplace to a factory. They're working from home with real work. And so they're working, they can't even get away from their workplace. And so now we start talking about things where, are we heaping, are we straining at gnats and making people swallow camels and all that stuff like that when we get into this stuff? Yeah. Okay. But this is another hand with it. Notice that Jesus does not say the Sabbath is important or you don't have to observe the Sabbath. Jesus removes the nitpicking over definitions, but he never sets aside the Sabbath itself. The Sabbath is clearly important to Jesus. He always goes to the synagogue on the Sabbath, right? That was important to him. He ministers and teaches on the Sabbath. He helps others on the Sabbath. And presumably he rests and renews with his disciples on the Sabbath, which I'm sure he did. Paul the same way. Jesus removes from a Sabbath observance built around rules to one built around people. And that included rest and renewal. And for Jesus, it also seems to have included gathering for prayer in the synagogue. He saw that the intent of the Sabbath was to bless God's people, and he spent his Sabbath doing just that. I can live with that. So, who do you say that the Sabbath was created? Who does Jesus say that the Sabbath was created for? Us, right? And in what ways does Jesus' view on the Sabbath either challenge or confirm the way that you have approached the Sabbath in your life? Or I'm asking, do you do Sabbath differently now than you did earlier in your life? Is it any different? No. When I think about that, and I was talking about the porch, right? When did Sherman Trail and Sherman and Pete and Annis Collins and Uncle Woodrow, when did they all come around? On Sunday, right? Exactly. Never clicked until that's right. That's the day. And those are always wonderful times in that.
Mother was just cooking away.
Well, no, grandma was a cook anyway. And hey, Papa might have had to go out. He may have had to go out and leave for the mines because maybe he had to do even shift on that Sunday, depending on how it rotated. So doing stuff like that. So yeah. So like he says here that probably that a lot of people doing this, reading this book or going through this study, overcommitted people who have a hard time saying no. And often is your health, your family, your faith that suffer from an inability to say no. And I think God wants to say to those who struggle with this, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, saying that, just that sentence, it's not there's not an expounding on it, there's not an expansion on it. That's something that we each need to determine. We should work hard during the week and give our best, but one day in 7, we're meant to get off the hamster wheel. Wait,
Holiday day.
no, all right, so here's some things, and there's one thing that's for later for you here. So one is, how do you identify with what the author says about an inability to say no? Somebody asks you to do something, you're gonna do it, you may know you have 20 other things to do, or 5 other things to do, you're gonna try and say, oh, I'll try to fit it in. And in what ways? The other piece would be, how can you reclaim Sabbath in your own life if you think you need to, or you want to do something different, or whatever. What ways? Think about those things. So one, can you identify with his statement about there's saying no? I want you to consider from tonight and on what ways that you can reclaim the Sabbath in your own life. If you've reflected, done some reflection, think, maybe I need to look at this part of it, how I observe. And then I want to do this, and I'll send this question out again. Think of 4 things that renew you, that bring you joy, that you haven't done in a while or haven't done enough of lately. Write them down. Don't just think about them, but write them down and take some time. And I want you to take some time to complete that list. All right? To do that on that. And that's all we got. Well, you got any comments, Mitzi or Carolyn? That's a no. I hope we're not disconnected. Are we still connected?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you're still connected.
Okay. Hey, how was the connection tonight? Did it break up or anything like that?
No, it was the best it's been.
That's an amen. That's a thank you, Lord.
Amen.
Thank
Yes,
you,
thank
Jacob Givens. That's what that is. Thank you, Jacob Givens. Yeah, Jake, come on, Jake.
Jake from State Farm.
Jake from State Farm, but his name on his little certificate is Jacob. So. Yeah, Jake. Jake set us up.
That's good.
All right. So, but any comments? Anything else before we close? Yes.
Now, the Jews, prior to the giving of the commandments,
Right.
were not a lawless people.
What do you mean?
They observed laws.
Oh, like just regular laws, maybe like Code of Hammurabi type laws and all that.
Whatever,
Yeah.
don't murder. Did they observe the Sabbath before Moses?
No way. No way. I don't think Abraham, I don't think the patriarchs did. You know what I mean? Not in a sense. I think that they had their places of worship that they set up that were sacred places, but I don't think, did they have a place of worship and were they rituals? I don't know. We don't know.
You really don't need a place of worship
No,
for the Sabbath.
no, you do not.
It's family and then a morning
Right.
service.
But I don't think they did.
Torah and Haftorah.
I don't think so. I wonder where did Moses got it from?
Well, he got it from God,
There you go.
supposed
Right.
to have gotten it from him.
Because that was,
It doesn't mean that God is not repeating.
no, but I'm saying like, he was pointing out that like you can't, I guess those that research and look, haven't been able to found in any civilization stuff around there that there was a designated day for
That's
anybody.
right.
That this is the first occurrence of such a thing. Right? And so, no, I would say no, they didn't. I don't believe that they did. I don't think they did. I think they got up, they watered, they took their cattle, they took care of their livestock, and they went on and did it. They moved if they had to move them, they did whatever. I don't think there was a certain time. That's just what I think. Because I think they had to. I don't think they felt like they could take it. Yeah,
Well, it's interesting
it is.
that
There's people that.
the actual Sabbath observance is clouded and misty in history. And you go look at Deuteronomy, it gives you a different reason for the observance.
Right.
It gives you
What was that,
coming
5:13?
out of Egypt.
5:13.
So the northern kingdom, which is where the Exodus account apparently comes from.
Right.
The lowest emphasized the creation on the day of rest, whereas the Deuteronomic tradition emphasized the coming out of Egypt as the reason.
Oh, so the deed, so would that be like a Yahweh's or a Yahweh's would be the creation part?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
J, that would be the J.
I don't know, I'm just, it's irrelevant, I suppose, I don't know.
Well, it's,
It's a question that popped up in my mind.
they kept all of
Hmm?
it. And they kept, but the thing I'll say is that there's not one view that is, they would, I think they would, the rabbis, there's not one view that's held over another, but they all hold together in some way.
Right. It's
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to say, well, oh, this is what, that
This
they,
whole thing was put together. You know, 500 years before Christ,
right.
in its final form. I guess,
I wonder, like, okay, so they talk about when Judge died, and finally they found the rule, when they found the Deuteronomic stuff in there, and how they, you know, he said we're one of the reforms of Josiah
yeah,
and all that, before they went into exile and stuff, and they weren't keeping Sabbath and doing what they were supposed to do then. So anyway, all right.
So could we say, when we have a prayer, when we read the scriptures, it doesn't matter what day or how long, but we're worshiping the Lord, could that be Sabbath?
so what?
Oh, like say your day,
Any day.
you do Sabbath on Wednesday.
Right, any day, whenever I feel
Worship every day.
close to the Lord, is that Sabbath?
I don't think we should, I don't know if I want to try to make a distinction in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
Because it's a, Sunday's a picked out day, it's not like it's a. You know, it's not, it's a picked out day.
Yeah.
If we were going to do something, we should go back to sundown and stuff, what we should do, probably. All right. Well, let's have, you guys ready? We're going to close with prayer and get going.
Don't have supper.
God, thank you for this day. And I think I'm looking forward to Sunday. And maybe my mind will be a little different as I go into that day, and maybe I will find you a little more dearly and a little more nearly. So bless us, oh God, as we go from this place. Keep us safe and well, I pray, until we gather again here. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
All right, you all. We'll stop the share. Be well. I'm glad the connection was good. It is good to go. So we'll be able to do this on, it'll go better on Sunday too. Take care, everybody.